Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim Portz. I'm the executive editor of Biomass Magazine and Pellet Mill Magazine. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for what should be a short and fast-moving overview of Pellet Mill Magazine's 2015 editorial outlook. I'm joined today by John Nelson, Sales and Marketing Director here at BBI International, and we could not be more excited to talk to you about Pellet Mill Magazine, its readership, and what we've got in store for 2015. Everyone in this industry is very busy, and we are really flattered that folks have taken some time out of their busy days to hear what we've got to say. I want to draw a little bit of attention to the attendees to today's call. Our registration log is made up of professionals from 19 different countries, which I think highlights the truly global nature of the industrial and thermal pellet markets. And really, our attendees come from all types of different organizations. We have material handling companies represented on today's call, software and process control providers, engineering firms, manufacturers of pellet presses, rail, port, and barge infrastructure representatives, logging organization, spark detection, dust control providers, construction organizations, which is testament to the fact that this industry is still building out capacity and will be for the foreseeable few years, manufacturers of RTO and RCO emission control systems, as well as timber holding organizations, REITs and TIMOs, pellet producers themselves, as well as research entities. And it's been really gratifying to see the registrations come in. I had an opportunity to reach out and invite some of you personally. I thank you for taking our invitations to heart, and I certainly want to make this worth your time. Let's talk a little bit about our agenda for this afternoon. Shortly I will hand over the microphone to my colleague, John Nelson. John will walk us through the audience that Pellet Mill Magazine has amassed. It's important to remember that Pellet Mill Magazine started 3 years ago as a supplement, a twice-a-year supplement to Biomass Magazine. And the two titles are still linked. All of our pellet content online is carried at biomassmagazine.com, and all of our circulation is linked. So subscribers to Biomass Magazine also receive Pellet Mill Magazine in the mail. So the biomassmagazine.com platform continues to carry our pellet content to our readership. That's where my pellet blog is kept, and that is where our day-to-day pellet news is housed. So that's important to remember. So what started as a two-time-a-year supplement has grown to, in 2014, a quarterly supplement, and in 2015 we're very excited to announce that we will move to a six-time publication format. So every other month there will be an issue of Pellet Mill Magazine generated and shared with our audience, and we're very excited. And of course, that's all in response to the dynamic nature of this exciting industry, the amount of news that's out there, and the quickly changing market realities that this industry is experiencing. John will also talk a little bit about circulation, who our readers are, where they come from. He'll talk about our online component, which I just mentioned, biomassmagazine.com, and the readership that that online portal enjoys. We want to talk a little bit about a webinar platform that we introduced in late 2013 and really honed and perfected in 2014, and what that does not only for our audience, but also for the organizations that have elected to support those webinars with their sponsorship. Some really interesting realities there that I want you all to pay close attention to. At that point, John will hand the webinar back to me. I will talk about Pellet Mill Magazine, how we organize each issue, and then I'll move into an issue-by-issue rundown of Pellet Mill Magazine for 2015, talk about our themes, talk about some of the bonus distributions that we've paired with each title. I think you'll see a logical pairing. We've gone to great lengths to match up thematically our titles with the bonus distributions conferences that are available globally, and marry those up and try and make those sync up to really deliver as much value as we possibly can to all of you, our advertisers, prospective advertisers. And finally, you'll want to stay on the call through the end. At the end of the webinar, we've got an exclusive discount for those of you that have joined us today. Before I hand it over to John, I want to talk just very briefly about the last couple of weeks at Biomass Magazine and Pellet Mill Magazine by extension. I'm looking right now at a story that we posted just yesterday. The title of that story is Biomass Industry Welcomes Record Pellet Demand in the Northeast. I think all of us recognize that the rapid growth of the pellet market has really been fueled by co-firing and the power opportunities that we're finding in the United Kingdom and other European countries. But what's quietly happening in the domestic market is the market is very strong here. The thermal market's very strong in the United States and continues to grow. And excited to talk about that. We have one of the issues of Pellet Mill Magazine in 2015 dedicated to heating markets, so we can talk a little bit more about that at that time. So with that said, I want to get moving on the webinar here, and I'm very happy to introduce again my colleague John Nelson, Sales and Marketing Director here at BBI International. John, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. We're now going to take a look at the circulation, readership, and some of the ancillary products associated with Biomass Magazine, or sorry, I'm sorry, Pellet Mill Magazine. After taking a look at these slides, we'll have a better understanding of why we believe that if you're looking to expand your brand and increase sales in the pellet industry, Pellet Mill Magazine's targeted readership, both print and digital, can offer you the best opportunity to gain mass exposure by reaching producers, policymakers, and other professionals focused on pellets. Now, because of the success of the industry and a little bit about what Tim said about us increasing our magazine, we have increased the number of print issues being mailed from 4 times a year to 6 times a year. In addition to the increase, in addition to what, our increase of the issues, we're also printing the magazine, and it's now mailed to 7,500 biomass and pellet mill industry professionals. So it's going out 6 times a year, and each time it goes out, it's going to 7,500 biomass and pellet industry professionals. And we know from a recent survey of our readers that each magazine has a readership rate of 2.5 people per issue. So using those numbers, each issue of Pellet Mill Magazine is read 18,750 times. And what's even more impressive is that we send copies of our magazine to all current or future pellet producers. And in addition to those producers, we receive who receive the copy, we mail Pellet Mill Magazine to all attendees of the International Biomass Conference and Expo, as well as a number of important industry events that Tim's going to cover in a few moments when he's discussing the editorial slides. As you can see on this slide, with readers in 52 countries, the largest category of our readership base consists of producers representing 17% of our circulation. The graph also shows the next types of companies who are subscribers. They are equipment and service providers, consultants, engineers, technology providers, officials in the government and military, and so on. So, one of the things we want to make sure you understand that when you purchase advertising in Pellet Mill Magazine, you can definitely be assured that you are reaching the right people in the pellet industry. Next slide, please. As we've mentioned, Pellet Mill Magazine is a part of Biomass Magazine, and with that being said, they share the same website titled biomassmagazine.com. Sharing the site between the two publications is a win-win because Pellet Mill Magazine benefits from and greatly contributes to Biomass Magazine's web presence, which for the past couple of years has rapidly grown. Through the use of our ongoing stories being posted to the website, search engine optimization strategies, new and original content, listings on the Pellet Producer Map, Tim's blog titled The Ash Content Blog, the Biomass Store, and Biomass Industry Directory, we have increased our traffic to the numbers you see before you on this slide. And I do want to note that the numbers that all the numbers that we use on here are from Google Analytics, and they were taken from July 2013 to July 2014. And you can definitely reach out to either Chip or Howard, and we can give you some additional stats if you want to dig even deeper into that. So we're now seeing a whopping 122,738 page views or impressions per month on biomassmagazine.com and 65,875 visits per month. So it's easy to say that this is the largest gathering of biomass professionals. And so what does that mean to you as the advertiser? It hopefully means that when you purchase online advertising on biomassmagazine.com, more people will view your ad because impressions to our website have increased. The goal is to generate clicks to your website, have you gain more business, and increase sales. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick shot of our demographics, and we have visitors on our website from around the globe. Just like this webinar, we have people from all over. And nearly half of our visitors on biomassmagazine.com are from outside the U.S. Clearly, our top visitors are from the United States, with the UK, Canada, India, and Germany following. So if you're looking to reach both the U.S. pellet audience and the global pellet audience, biomassmagazine.com and online advertising is a great option for you. Next slide, please. So you're probably wondering, why are we showing you our social media networks? Well, the reason we're showing you this is we want to make sure you as an advertiser understand that we are always looking to develop and grow our social media sites and our networks. We want to make sure we're reaching everyone, and that includes the conversations that are happening on the social network. So every story that we post, every event that we're going to and talking about is posted onto our social media sites. And hopefully those are getting retweeted or liked and sent on to other people outside our network. And why that is extremely important to you as an advertiser is because people are clicking on those links and those stories and coming back to biomassmagazine.com, where they will see hopefully your ad that you placed there, click on it, and go to your website. And so we've seen a lot of activity on our Facebook page, our Twitter, and so these are definitely things that we continue to spend time on growing, because we're seeing a lot of traffic coming into biomassmagazine.com from our social networks. Next slide, please. So this is the Pellet Mill Press e-newsletter, and the e-newsletter is Pellet Mill Magazine's dedicated newsletter, and it's sent out twice a month to 22,000 pellet industry professionals. The stories in the e-newsletter are all original and timely, so that making it an extremely highly opened and read e-newsletter with a very targeted audience. And with advertising pricing starting at just $295, it is a great way for companies to reach all 22,000 on our email list at an extremely low cost. And tracking the effectiveness of this type of advertising is very easy, because we will provide you with the click rates and specific companies that are clicking on your ad. And last, I want to mention about our e-newsletter, I would definitely contact Chip or Howard and check on availability. Because of the low price point and tracking ability, these e-newsletters tend to sell out months in advance. And so if you're launching a new product or have an event that you want to promote, this is an excellent option for you. Next slide, please. The BMID, the Biomass Industry Directory. It's one of our most popular ancillary products of Pellet Mill Magazine, and Biomass Magazine. And it is called the Biomass Industry Directory. And you definitely want to be sure to log on to biomassmagazine.com and take advantage of your free listings. Every company receives one free listing on our online directory and one free listing in our printed issue of the directory. The insertion deadline for your free listing and advertising in the print edition is December 5th, so definitely log on and make sure you take advantage of that. And by listing or purchasing advertising in the Biomass Industry Directory, your company's name and contact info will be distributed throughout the biomass industry at workshops, conferences, and trade shows. And in addition, a complimentary copy of the printed directory is sent to all current subscribers of Biomass Magazine and Pellet Mill Magazine, including all major pellet producers. And an additional point I want to make, or just put some emphasis on, is that this is a great way to promote your company all year, because we bring these directories not only to BBI International events like the International Biomass Conference and Expo, but we bring it to almost all major events in the pellet and biomass industry. And I can safely say that these directories usually fly off our table. They're extremely popular. So I encourage you to take a look at the advertising options in the directory. Next slide, please. So sponsorships of the webinar series are an effective new advertising option for companies this year that are looking to engage a specific audience for 90 minutes at a time. Attendance for these webinars has been strong because these events are content-driven and provide valuable information to the attendees from our industry expert panelists. And as a sponsor, you'll have your logo with your URL listed on all of the emails that are sent out promoting the webinar, which is roughly 150,000, the Biomass Magazine website registration page, online advertisements, weekly e-newsletter ads, and our on-demand webinar section of Biomass Magazine. Since the launch of Biomass Magazine's webinar series, we've had 7,000 biomass professionals register and have averaged 350 people per webinar. And one thing I want to say that without a doubt, because we've done so many of these, we are confident that this is one of the best ways you can identify companies and people interested in the specific topic within the pellet industry. And most importantly, in addition to all the promotional benefits I listed, as the main sponsor for our webinars, we physically give you the contact information of all the attendees and registrants of the webinar. And that's email included. And you can see a shot of an Excel spreadsheet listed on this slide. And so if you're interested in any more information about these webinars, again, please contact Howard or Chip at our office. And with that, Tim, do you have any more thoughts on our webinars and the content you and your team have assembled in the past?
Yeah, absolutely, John, and I thank you for that. I would probably classify myself initially as a webinar skeptic, admittedly. It was a new platform for us in 2013. I wasn't exactly sure how the platform would work out for our team, for our audience, for our speakers. That's always a concern of mine. And we launched in 2013, and the very first webinar that we had was actually a pellet webinar, interestingly enough. And the webinar featured two speakers, Seth Ginther from the U.S. Industrial Pellet Association and Dave Tenney, President and CEO of the National Alliance of Forest Owners. Brought those two gentlemen together. They agreed to be our beta test for webinars, and over 500 folks registered for that webinar. Some 380 turned out for the first webinar. So my skepticism was short-lived, to say the least, and we pretty much haven't looked back. The other story I like to tell whenever we talk about webinars, obviously Hearst Boiler here was a very happy sponsor of webinars. They've subsequently sponsored another webinar for us, and they really enjoy the platform. But the story that I want to tell is not about the sponsors that we have attracted. It's actually about a webinar that did not attract a sponsor, and that is the Tiny Bubbles webinar. And so I'll tell my Tiny Bubbles story very quickly, and we'll move on. Last year we hosted a webinar all about anaerobic digestion at breweries. And we had 4 different brewers who had deployed anaerobic digestion at their facilities to handle and break down their brewery waste and to provide a thermal load for the facility. And we called a number of providers in that space, and maybe because the platform was new, they weren't sure, and everyone passed. So we held the webinar anyway and attracted over 350 folks, and that's impressive enough. But the really impressive part was over 100 brewers joined us for the webinar. And I really look at that as a missed opportunity for those sponsors, because it's one thing to have a piece of content and wonder about folks' interests. It's another thing entirely to have people raise their hands, identify themselves as a brewer, and identify themselves as a brewer that's potentially interested in deploying a anaerobic digestion solution. And there's other stories in our webinar platform just like that one. People do sign up. You are able to very quickly identify those customers, those prospects that maybe you hadn't considered, maybe you'd never heard of, had no idea they were interested in your particular offering. And here you are, they raise their hand, they say, I'm interested in X or Y or Z or whatever. So looking very much forward to growing the webinar platform in 2015. We're going to work on webinars aggressively, and for all of you who have joined today and other BBI webinars, you know that we put a lot of work into them, and it's a really, really nice offering for both our sponsors and our audience. But let's talk just briefly, the time we've got left, about Pellet Mill Magazine, how we organize the magazine, what we're excited about, and what we've got planned for 2015. So I always like to include a snapshot of the table of contents to give people a sense of what all is inside one issue of Pellet Mill Magazine. And the first thing that I want to do is draw attention to this area here in the blue. And these are our regular columnists. And we really are humbled by the participation that we have from association leadership in this space. You can see here Jennifer Hadrick has a regular column with us in Pellet Mill Magazine. Seth Ginther also has a regular column. Chris Weiberg writes a great column for us on pellet quality. So these are names that if you operate in this space, you certainly know these folks. More importantly, their constituents know these folks. So Jennifer and Seth together really represent everyone who manufactures pellets in the United States, with a few exceptions. So by having them a part of our title, it's a really strong endorsement to their members that this title is worth reading. It's worth Seth's time. It's worth Jennifer's time to contribute to. And they pick it up. They read what Seth has to say, and then they carry on in the title. The other thing I want to talk about is our features. In 2004, we did not have themes. And we ended up kind of organizing the title in this way. We really look at, and it's not just us, we've heard professionals in the industry tell us, the pellet industry, while there's certainly overlap, there's really kind of 2 subsets of the industry. There's a pellet producer that manufactures somewhere around 50 to 80,000 metric tons per year, and they satisfy a largely domestic and regionalized heating market. And we always look to provide stories that are relevant to that particular audience. The other subset of the industry, of course, is this quickly growing large industrial producer of pellets that's largely looking to users from a power sense of the word, and that's the market that they're satisfying. So they're producing somewhere between 350 and 500,000 metric tons per year, and we try and have stories that appeal to those as well. And so you can see just in this particular issue, this is the second quarter issue in 2014, we did a story on appliances, and we did another story on trying to forecast pellet demand. That story was written not long after the so-called pellet shortage of 2013 into the early months of 2014. And those are clearly stories that are targeted towards that first audience I talked about, the domestic producers. And then the story here, our continuing coverage of the conversions of a couple of very large coal assets in the United Kingdom, very, very large demand being created by those types of facilities, Drax namely. We did a story on that to draw the attention of those producers. The other thing we like to do, we like to feature plants and producers that are in the space. I'm reminded that this Q&A here was with a Colorado-based producer, Mark Mathis. He's got a unique feedstock story, has a stewardship contract for stands of forests that are impacted by pine beetle. And that was a fun Q&A to do with Mark. So we really feel like we've got a title that will draw people in, hold people's attention. And one of the things we didn't mention, we did a study of our readers and asked them a number of questions. And interestingly, and this is tough for an editorial person to own up to, but about 50% of our readers suggest that they open our title as much for the advertisements, the ads, as for the features themselves. So that's a good and bad thing all at once. As a writer, of course, I want to believe that folks tune in for our crack analysis of the industry and the photography that we've worked hard to drive into the title. But the reality is a lot of folks are in there to look at your ads, learn about your offerings, and that's a very, very good thing as well. So I've got just a little bit of time here. I do want to just give a very quick rundown of what we got planned in 2015. Again, we are moving to 6 publications in 2015, and let's very quickly run through those now. So the January-February issue, the first issue out of the gates. I want to make a point right now. This issue, the insertion deadline for this issue is 2 weeks from yesterday. So all of a sudden, the 2015 publication season is upon us. We're actually at work on a couple of stories right now. We're opening this year's editorial calendar with a issue dedicated exclusively to European production and consumption. The growth in the industrial segment of this industry is largely, right now, being driven by European buyers who are either converting coal assets to pellet use or increasingly co-firing pellets with coal to achieve renewable targets. A couple of these stories that we're working on I can talk about right now. I'm excited. Katie Flesher, staff writer for us, is doing a story exclusively on the German pellet production industry. We haven't done a story like this. Germany is Europe's largest manufacturer of wood pellets. So we're excited to understand the scope, the size and scope of that industry, how that industry intersects with the German forest products industry. What are the differences between German pellet producers and U.S. and Canadian-based producers? What are the markets that German producers are serving? And we're really excited about that. I'm writing a story about the Netherlands, the growing pellet market in the Netherlands. When I was in Miami in September for Seth Ginther's Exporting Pellets Conference, without question, the market in the Netherlands was receiving top billing. There are some pending policies that many observers and market forecasters in this space suggest will have the Netherlands with an annual pellet demand of over 3 million tons of pellets per year, closer to 3.5 million tons of pellets per year. So I'm very interested in producing that particular story, digging into that, finding out where does that policy stand right now. In most of the market forecasts that we've reported on, including Seth Walker from RISI's market forecast, people are assuming, in fact, that 3.5 million tons of demand will eventually come from the Netherlands. So looking forward to that. Again, this issue and the insertion deadline for this issue is less than 2 weeks away. We're going to be distributing this title at the 2015 European Pellet Conference in Wels, Austria. I was there last year. This truly is one of the world's preeminent discussions about the global pellet trade. There were people from all over the world there last year talking about the global market, and we're really excited to pair this issue with that particular conference and think it offers an incredible opportunity for our advertisers. All right, let's talk about the second issue of 2015, foreign and domestic heating markets. Again, I said this, everyone is very excited about the opportunity by power stations converting over exclusively to wood pellets or introducing wood pellets into a co-firing scenario. That said, in 2013, pellets sold for heating outstripped pellets sold for power. And most market forecasts suggest that heating will continue to be the leader when it comes to total demand. Why? Because pellets in many, many, many parts of the world are the lowest cost provider of heat available to folks. So countries like Austria, where nearly half of the residential thermal loads are delivered by wood pellets, define the opportunity in this particular segment. Italy, another large user of pellets and continues to grow. The United Kingdom with their renewable heat incentive, we probably will take a deep dive into that particular issue, that market opportunity. And then you can see, obviously, one of the reasons that we chose this particular issue to really dive into foreign and domestic heating markets are the opportunities that you see listed here in terms of bonus distributions. Heating the Northeast with renewable biomass, a very popular event sponsored by BTEC. We'll have this issue of Pellet Mill Magazine and then the Argus Biomass Trading Conference. My personal favorite conference of the entire conference calendar, of course, the 2015 International Biomass Conference and Expo, and then the cousin of Heating the Northeast with renewable biomass, Heating the Midwest. So great bonus distribution. It pairs perfectly with the theme. Looking forward to putting that issue together. May, June 2015, feedstock and supply chain sustainability will be the theme. This is a really, really interesting question. And anybody that is on the phone that has not yet read my last blog, Ash Content, what I learned from Danny Fortson, I think that particular blog says everything that I could ever say about this issue. One of the most compelling discussions going on in our space right now is this notion of sustainability. And foreign policy makers, they put these policies in place, and they want assurances that the feedstock and the feedstock machine that eventually delivers the pellets to their facilities is sustainable. And sustainable is a broad word. What does sustainable mean? How do we guarantee it? And this is a really interesting discussion in our space right now. It's important to remember that pulpwood markets and the demand for pulpwood are really a very, very low value input. It's a very low value byproduct of a larger forestry machine that has a higher value product that it really leads with. Forestry is not, people don't engage in forestry for pulpwood. Pulpwood instead feeds on byproducts of timber that is harvested for saw logs. That's the dog, and the pulpwood market is the tail. So when foreign buyers want to impose these sustainability standards and ask for certification and third-party certification, we're at a bit of an impasse because we're asking folks to take on new cost inside of their operation to satisfy buyers for some of their lowest value fiber. And that's an interesting discussion that we're happy to be a part of and report on, and a lot of that will occur in this particular issue of Pellet Mill Magazine. And you can see we've got a really great bonus distribution relative to that. The 2015 Forest Landowners National Conference, the 2014 issue, went to the same conference, and I was there personally, spoke at that event. These are the folks that own the stands of forest that are feeding these pellet mills. This is an audience that's interested in what's happening, wants to participate in this marketplace, but wants to make sure that the sustainable nature of what they're already doing is recognized. So this is an argument and a discussion that will go back and forth. We're looking forward to this issue very much. July, August, into the summer swing here. Production efficiencies and regulatory issues. I've got to tip my hat to a member of our editorial board here. When we made the decision to go 6 times a year, I shared some basic ideas about some concepts I had for themes, and this one came from a member of our editorial board. Regulatory issues, permitting is increasingly important, and particularly when you look at what's happening with the emissions requirements that are happening at these larger facilities. So just over a year and a half ago, I was at the Georgia Biomass Facility in Waycross, Georgia, and they had deployed a regenerative catalytic oxidizer onto their the actual pellet line, the pelletizing line, because what they were finding was that via the pelletization process, they were emitting volatile organic compounds from that particular part of the facility. They hadn't counted on that, discovered that was happening, and needed to deploy some equipment to handle and destroy those to be in line with the emissions requirements. And then the production efficiencies component we feel really pairs well nicely with the regulatory concept. So how can pellet producers introduce either equipment or process approaches that can make their facility run a couple of points more efficiently here and there. So if you feel like you have a product or service that can help producers drive out costs, drive out energy spends, increase yield, all of those things, this is definitely an issue that you will want to consider strongly. And the bonus distribution is the Pellet Fuels Institute annual conference. It's in attendee bags. Everyone that goes will see it, will interact with the title, and we're really happy to have that as a bonus distribution. Moving into September and October, infrastructure and distribution channels. Probably this particular aspect of the pellet space is the one that I personally have the most interest in. The photograph that you see here on the cover of this issue is a photograph I took at Port of Brunswick in northern Georgia. And this is actually a handy-sized carrier being loaded with wood pellets. And it's really fascinating what's happening. All across the country, all across the world, there are major investments being made at ports, and not just in the stuff that's very clear to see, the storage domes that you see at Port of Charleston and Port Allen in Louisiana. We just did a story on that in the Biomass Magazine side, and those domes are very easy to point to and say, well, those are pellet storage domes. There's investments in the infrastructure. What you can't see in this photograph is the channel was deepened 6 feet to accommodate larger vessels, predominantly because of the demand that they have to move pellets out of this particular port. So there's the infrastructure side of it. Distribution channel. I'm working very hard to put together a story, and I really wanted to do it last year. We had troubles getting some sources to talk to us, but for instance, a story that we really want to do is a story about the role that big box retailers play in the pellet trade in this country. And big box retailers in some instances are producers' singular customers. Many producers sell well over 80%, 90% in some instances to big box retailers and their sales channels. And so that has some upsides and some downsides, of course. Anybody that's familiar with big box retailers knows that they're price leaders, and so they demand their products at a very aggressive prices sometimes. So those are the types of stories that we're looking forward to doing in that particular issue. Really excited, again, about a number of different bonus distributions. The Pellet Trade Conference in Korea, the Industry Forum in Germany, a Peers Tappy Conference, and Can Bio, which we had staff at this year and are looking forward to having a bonus distribution for this issue next year. And lastly, we'll wrap up our 2015 editorial calendar with Asian production and consumption. And this really is the next big thing relative to global pellet markets, and it's starting now. The last 2 quarters there have seen a significant rise in imports into places like South Korea and Japan. Largely so far, that demand has been met with producers in Southeast Asia, but demand is being satisfied by largely Canadian producers, some U.S.-based producers, and we fully anticipate that those opportunities for Canadian and U.S.-based producers will continue to grow. But again, we want to look at who are the major players from a production standpoint in Asia. Vietnam comes to mind, and we've run stories in the last 2 or 3 months about joint ventures between North American interests and Asian interests in Vietnam, a couple of different production facilities, all with an eye on this much talked about, and it seems like now, real manifest market opportunity largely in South Korea, but also in Japan. And the bonus distribution there is the Wood Pellet Association of Canada's annual conference, which I will be going to in just 2 weeks from now. So we're looking forward to having this be a bonus distribution for our first issue dedicated to Asian production in 2015. So I realize that was quick, but obviously everyone's busy. I want to get folks back to it. Just wanted to give you a sampling of the excitement that we have for our brand, the excitement that we have for what we intend to cover in 2015. I want to thank today's sponsor, the International Biomass Conference and Expo. Last year we had the International Biomass Conference and Expo, and I really believe it turned a corner in terms of its ability to attract an international audience. If you were there, you know that this just isn't hyperbole. There were a lot of foreign attendees at last year's International Biomass Conference. We bring the International Biomass Conference back to my hometown this year, Minneapolis, Minnesota, in April. If you haven't been to the Twin Cities before, I recommend it. Come to our event. We're already on the verge of being able to announce some things about the International Biomass Conference and some co-located pre-conferences as well as tours that truly will make this the most important 4 days in the biomass industry anywhere in the world in 2015. We believe that. We're dedicated to delivering that. It's important to note that we are accepting presentation ideas, and if you have something to offer to this industry from a service standpoint, from an equipment standpoint, I want you to consider presenting at this year's International Biomass Conference and Expo. More details on that can be found online, and we will wrap up our call for abstracts just before the Christmas holiday here in December. More information available on all of that at biomassconference.com. As I said earlier, our webinar platform continues to be fantastic. Here's our very next webinar is actually a sponsored webinar. The good folks at CAT are sponsoring this webinar. It's already attracting a great big audience. Biogas Energy Project Success, Overcoming Common Pitfalls. I'll be moderating this particular webinar with Ben, Paul, and Ross, and we're going to be talking about how to avoid those common pitfalls. And finally, as promised, if you were on the webinar today and you've not advertised with us before, we've got a 35% off sale for a full-page print advertisement. It's available to anybody that was on the call today, anyone that registered for the call. So if you know that your marketing person couldn't join us today and you were watching, please make them aware of this. It's good until January 1st, 2015. Talk to Howard. Talk to Chip. If you don't know who those gentlemen are, just call this number, 866-746-8385, and let whoever answers the phone know that you're interested in making good on this particular offer, and someone will help you. I can't thank you enough for the time. It's my great privilege to cover the pellet industry. I thank you for your readership. I thank you for your attention today, and I hope that you'll give strong consideration to leveraging what I think is a great platform, the best in the industry, for reaching this audience to serve your marketing needs in 2015 And with that, I bid you all good afternoon, and please keep reading Pellet Mill Magazine and keep reading Biomass Magazine. I'm Tim Portz. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.